You're listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Holy crap, you lot. Episode 30. Bit of a milestone here on the Straight to Video podcast. Things have gone by so quick, and I've had some great response over the past couple of weeks to chats and interviews with a lot of people diving back into earlier conversations and sending some great feedback about who we've spoken to, so thank you all so much. Today's interview was a lot of fun as I got the opportunity to talk to Christine Elise. If, like myself, you grew up during the late 80s and early 90s, you will no doubt remember Christine for her role as Emily Valentine in the hit TV show Beverly Hill's 90210. Or if you're a horror fan, you may well know her as Kyle from Child's Play 2, or perhaps you saw her as Harper Tracy in another massive TV show, ER. Christine is originally from Boston, Massachusetts, where she grew up as a teenager, being heavily into the punk rock and hardcore music scene of the time, which it was really cool to speak to her about. We also talk about her move from Boston to Hollywood to originally become a film director, but changed direction and earned great mainstream success as an actor, which I believe proved to be in part to how genuine and true to herself she is, and she brings that to all her roles and projects. Last year saw the return of Beverly Hill's 90210 to TV, and Christine talks openly about that experience and also the reaction to the show, and she also talks about her hopes for the new Child's Play TV show, which is in the production stages. This whole talk was a lot of fun, and Christine was as outspoken and fiery as I hoped she would be throughout, and holds little back, which is awesome. Hope you enjoy it and take the time to check out all her current projects, such as her novel Bathing and the Single Girl at bathingbook.com, where you can find out all about the book and its accompanying short film. Also check out her YouTube channel, which can be found at videovegan.com, and for all other info visit itschristine.com. So here we go with my straight to video chat with the wonderful Christine Elise.
Hey.
How's it going?
Okay, how you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. So how you been? You been holding up okay?
Yeah, I'm sort of a recluse naturally, so it hasn't I mean, I have my ups and downs like everybody, but nobody I know has gotten sick, so yeah, I'm doing better than should be expected.
So before acting came into the picture, you had a big passion for music, particularly the punk rock scene in and around Boston, which I believe you got a lot of encouragement to be part of from your mum and your stepdad. Could you tell us a little bit about how you became exposed to that at such a young age?
Yeah, so I was always into music. My biological father was a big audiophile, big music guy, the kind of fan of music that would he organize his records by the label, not the artist. Like, you have to be a really big fan of music to know what label each of your artists are even on, you know? So I learned it from him. And my stepfather we left my dad when I was like 13. At 14, my mother met the man she's married to now, who was a drummer in a jazz band at the time. But his taste in music was evolving into the more alternative stuff that was out there, coming out, like the Talking Heads and Television and Jam and those sort of things that were early punk rock, you know? other kinds of punk rock and not just the Sex Pistols. Punk rock is a much broader thing than outsiders really realize, I think. So before that, I see you've got a Van Halen album cover behind you. I was a big Kiss and a Van Halen fan before the punk rock thing, which at the time was sort of the punk rock of the era. Being into Kiss was tantamount to being punk rock in 1977, 1978. And so it wasn't a big jump, I don't think, to go from the costumes and pageantry of Kiss and the sort of heavy rock elements of Van Halen and AC/DC and Kiss to punk rock, So I got my first exposure really to those bands like the Talking Heads and Devo and Gary Newman, of whom I was an enormous fan, on Saturday Night Live.
Right,
that was
cool.
They had the best bands ever, and I was like, once I saw those three bands, Talking Heads, Devo, and Gary Newman, I was off to the races. And so my parents were also growing, their interest was growing too. And they, of course, were old enough to go to clubs, which is where you saw bands at that time. They weren't playing in stadiums, or not that I'm really spoiled. Almost every great band I've ever seen, I've seen in a tiny club. And because I was a good kid, I didn't drink or do drugs. My parents just helped me get a really great fake ID, and they would take me to these clubs. And in all the years I was in Boston until I was 19. Legal age to drink there was 21. So I was never in a club legally in Boston. And I never had a single drink. I had my first drink in a bar in LA when I was 21.
Wow.
So I got really great, like people say youth is wasted on the young, and that's not the case with me. I had a really well spent youth.
What was it about the whole scene that you kind of gravitated to? Was it literally the music, or was it the whole kind of camaraderie in the scene and the whole underground aspect of it?
Well, initially there was nobody my age in the scene. There were two other people that I would spy here and there out. A kid named Springer and a guy named Michael McDonald. I didn't know either one of them, but I would see them here and there, clearly underage people that were out. So it wasn't about camaraderie initially. It was the music. It was the fashion, the, going to thrift stores and creating your own look, not trying to copy anybody else's look. Like it was a really super shameful thing to try to steal somebody else's look. I used to also look with great disdain upon people that would go to any show, whatever the show was, Bauhaus or X or, anything, XTC, and then be wearing that band's shirt at that band's show. That always seemed so lacking in imagination. Like, obviously you like XTC, you're at an XTC show. Why don't you wear a fucking Bauhaus shirt and show you have taste, broader taste, or just wear something that doesn't have a name on it at all. Make up your own outfits, which I was very good at. I think I was pretty creative and really I had huge balls. I was really brave. Took a lot of shit, got a lot of threats from people, always from far away, always from moving cars or buses that had just left the bus stop. No one had the balls to say shit to my face. But and they were on the buses and trains and stuff with me. They walked a wide circle around me. I sort of had a little protective force field around me because people thought I was insane.
I think that's kind of across all kind of music, things like heavy metal and all that kind of thing. Once you start growing your hair out, you always get weird looks if you're a guy growing your hair long and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, they wouldn't say it to your face, but they'd say it as they drove past. But if you confronted them, they wouldn't say a word.
I had the phrase rock lobster and whip it yelled at me from moving cars at least 1,000 times. At least 1,000 times.
I've spoke to some friends of mine about that, and I've said, like, did it ever bother you? And it was like, no, because I was like super happy in what I was doing. So you almost kind of prepared yourself.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it's like. It's exactly like being a liberal being attacked by a Trump supporter. I have no respect for you already, and I'm really pleased that you can see that I'm nothing like you. So it's a badge of honor. It's not any kind of thing to be ashamed of.
So how did like your friends from school see it? They're seeing you going to all these clubs. Was they jealous, or was they like, what are you doing?
Well, they wouldn't know. I didn't really have any friends in school. I had like one friend that was she was a little bit like new wavy girl, but she didn't go out. None of those kids were going to clubs. They were going to parking lots and drinking beer and smoking weed and doing what kids usually do in high school, One of the two kids that I saw out in a nightclub, his name was Michael McDonald. He's a really great author, Michael Patrick McDonald. He wrote 2 memoirs, one called All Souls and one called Easter Rising. They're both beautiful. The first one, All Souls, is about growing up in poverty in Boston, in an Irish family in the projects in Boston. And that's his sort of, through his child eyes, the story of his family. Really tragic, series of tragic things happened to that family. It's like, they call it, it's well known, and it's in colleges and stuff as required reading. It's sort of the American Angela's Ashes. And then his follow-up was Easter Rising, about how punk rock saved him from the same fate that much of his family succumbed to. So he and I became great friends. He's like my brother now. I've known him since he was 14 and I was 15. And the other boy that I saw in those clubs became my boyfriend later in high school. He was in a hardcore punk rock band called SSD or SSD Control. And the hardcore scene, that's where camaraderie began, because the hardcore scene was much younger kids and it was people my age. And I still am the youngest of them, you know, but they were at least teenage still, you know, and not legal. So a lot of the bands would play in artist spaces and galleries and makeshift DIY sort of locations. And there would be no alcohol. So there'd be all age shows so all these kids could go. And those people from that scene, the Boston scene is particularly notoriously close. And all those people became my chosen family and they remain so. I speak to them all the time. Every one of us keeps tabs on the other. We're really close.
How did you hear about gigs? Was it just through word of mouth or fanzines? What kind of networking was it back then?
There weren't very many fanzines at the time. There were flyering. People would flyer, make 8.5 by 11 flyers, just print them out of a printer and staple them all over the city. And then there was a paper in Boston called The Phoenix, which was sort of the college/arts paper. And they would list all the nightclubs and where things were playing at nightclubs. And so you could see it that way. And basically I would go see anything that came from England, by the way, anything British. If I hadn't heard of them, it didn't matter. Everything that came from England was Godhead, you know. I saw Bauhaus in a club with about 100 people. Really amazing. My mother is a photographer. And so she's got amazing photographs of all those bands from that era. She's on Instagram as, I think it's Gail Rush, GailRush, or Gail P. Rush. Check out her photos there. Really great stuff of Johnny Lydon and X and Peter Murphy and stuff. Great stuff.
Very cool. Is that where you kind of got your love of photography as well? Because you've done some cool photography.
Yeah, my stepfather's he's not a drummer anymore. He transitioned from being a drummer to being a watercolorist. He's always a watercolorist and he owned a recording studio for a long time. So the two of them do visual arts. You know, he's doing watercolor, she's doing photography, and so I was really inspired by both of them and influenced heavily by both of them. Their taste in things, their taste is sort of decaying Americana, like old closed drive-in theaters and old gas stations and vintage signage and that kind of stuff.
I saw some of your stuff like the Road Trip America.
Yeah.
This is totally left field away from the podcast, but one of them was titled Vicksburg, Mississippi. Is that somewhere you went through, or was it something you related one of the photos to? Or did I totally misunderstand that?
No, that's where it was. If it's called Vicksburg, that's where it was taken.
Okay, cool. Because my dad lives in Vicksburg, Mississippi. I was like, holy shit. That's it.
Oh, really? Have you been?
My dad moved over there when I was, about 3 years old. I stayed here with my mum. So I used to spend my summers there every 6-week vacation.
Beautiful. It's like a little New Orleans life, you know?
Yeah, it's great. When was you there?
In around 2004, 2003, I decided I was kind of have my fill of Los Angeles, and I tried to be bi-coastal and live in New York City and Brooklyn and LA. And I had 2 senior citizen dogs at the time that I couldn't fly. So I had to drive across country when I went to, so I drove across country like eight times in 2 years or something, and different route every time, trying to see as much of America as I could. I really love driving across country. It's one of my favorite things. It's an incredible luxury. My stepfather is typically my companion. My parents both live in Boston still, but if I was in New York and my agent's like, you need to get to LA because it's the stuff here for you to audition for or whatever, I'd call my stepdad and go, hey, it's Wednesday. Do you want to leave on Saturday and drive across country? And the answer was always yes. And because they're not a wealthy couple, but they live their lives sort of like artists. And he said, this is what he calls the riches of the poor. The riches of the poor is that he can drop everything and just jump in a car and drive across country and have a good time.
Awesome.
So, riches of the poor, I think, is a great phrase.
So was music something you ever thought of pursuing in one way or another? Either did you ever try instruments or try and become part of the music industry in any other way? Or was it all about film?
I was not a performer of any. I was super, super, super shy. Despite my aggressive appearance, I was really, really shy and not one for presentation or opening oneself for criticism like that, or for acceptance, really. So because my stepdad was a drummer and there's a drum kit in the house, I had him give me a couple of lessons, but then 2 girls and I tried to form a little band, but I was too shy to even play in front of them. So, and I wasn't talented either. And everybody I knew was a musician.
Kind of intimidating seeing how good everybody was and think, shit.
Yeah, and also something I didn't want to pursue. Like when I've golf, I've tried golf, I've taken lessons. I'm not good at golf, and I have no desire to, I have no aspiration to be better at golf. And that's not how I felt about music. It was just not my thing. I didn't become an actor till long after I moved to Los Angeles. I didn't move to LA to be an actor. I moved to LA to go to film school and become a director.
That's right. I read that. Did I read or read that it was the film Blade Runner that ignited your interest to be a director?
Yes.
So was that like something totally different to any kind of film you'd seen prior to that?
I'm a huge old Hollywood fan and a big film noir fan in particular. So there's big Humphrey Bogart and, Humphrey Bogart movies and movies written by Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. And I collected Pulp Fiction paperbacks too in high school. So Blade Runner was like a contemporary, modernized film noir movie. And I was really inspired by that. And it's funny, as an aside, Facebook every day gives you a little memories feed of stuff that you've posted on Facebook on that day in years past. And 2 years ago, when Brett Kavanaugh was being confirmed to the Supreme Court, it was revealed that he shares my birthday exactly, February 12th, 1965, which is horrifying to me because I believe he's a serial rapist. But big scandal in those hearings was his little date book and all this coded stuff he had in his date book about what he'd done. And it seemed from his date book that his alibis for what the day he was supposed to have raped that woman didn't hold up. I happened to keep the same sort of little diaries myself. So I checked if I had mine and what I was doing on that weekend. And it was like 2 days ago, I posted it on Instagram, the month of July for 1982. And in there, just coincidentally happens to be when I saw Blade Runner. If you look at some day in July of 82, it says Blade Runner on there, and you'll see that's when I saw Blade Runner. And that's the day that launched 1,000 ships.
Wow.
This happens to have been posted 2 days ago on Instagram.
That's crazy. Because one of my, what's the word I'm after? One of my failings is that I've never actually seen Blade Runner. As much of a big movie fan as I am, I've never actually seen it. And now I feel it's too late to see it because there's been so many edits of it and cuts, unless you can recommend which one to see.
Well, I would always recommend the director's cut, right? So I like them both, but the director's cut is certainly going to be better. And I'll tell you what, not only should you watch it, because it really does hold up, but even the sequel, Ryan Gosling,
mm-hmm.
is actually very good too. And I went into watching that with a big chip on my shoulder, and I thought it was fantastic. So I would watch the director's cut though, and I would do it ASAP because it's really beautiful. And Rutger Hauer is astonishing in it.
When people say, what do you mean you've never seen Blade Runner? I always say, because I was such a big Star Wars fan and Indiana Jones fan, I could never see Harrison Ford as anybody else. When I was a kid, I could never accept it. And then I found myself like, it's too late to see it now.
It is not. You've got to fix that. Glad you feel proper shame about it.
So did you look for any film opportunities in the Boston area, or was it always a plan to move out of town? Was Hollywood always the goal, or was there any opportunities in, say, like New York City or anywhere like that?
There may have been an opportunity in New York. I've always been a fan of Los Angeles. New York is super intimidating. I could have pursued film school in New York. I could have gone to NYU or something. New York is just at the time for me, it was too intimidating. And also it's a really, really unforgiving place to be poor. And Los Angeles is a very forgiving place to be poor. The weather is mild all year long. It's 2 weeks where it's hot, and there's like 1 week where it's 35 or something. It's like some version of spring all year long. Where in New York, you can literally freeze to death certain parts of the year, and people literally die from the heat waves in the summertime. And all that you don't have, all the things you could have but don't have, are right in your face all the time in New York, reminding you how poor you are. And everybody has roaches, and it's just like it's a very not Los Angeles world. LA, it's bright and sunny, and everybody has dogs, and the weather's perfect 95% of the time, and more of the industry is here. So I went to film school in Boston for 1 year, went to Boston University, and then I realized that I didn't want to live with my parents anymore, and it didn't make sense to finish film school in a town that didn't have a film industry. And I also knew that if I moved out of my parents' house and moved somewhere in Boston, that I would never be able to save the money to move to LA. So that the moving out of my parents' house had to be right from there from the pot into the fire. I had to move from their house right to Los Angeles at 19, which I did. And I intended to establish residency in California because at the time, before Ronald Reagan ruined it, state schools in California were like $600 a semester rather than $16,000 like they were in Boston at BU. And so that's practically free, So I thought I'll move to LA, I'll live there for a year and establish residency. Then I'll apply to these schools as a California resident, and I'll go to film school in LA. And then I can do internships, and I can learn my way around, and I can get a lot of balls up in the air and get things going and not be at a disadvantage upon graduation. And then life is just too expensive and too difficult, and film school became unattainable for me because I had to work 60 hours a week at $6 an hour to make ends meet, to barely make ends meet. So when film school became 2.5 years later of being a cashier in a really cheesy clothing store on Rodeo Drive, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be a retail person. There's nothing I loathe more than retail. I can't have this be the sum total of my life. How can I get into film without any training or skills or talent? I know, I'll be an actor. Actually, what I thought was, if I want to be a director, I'm going to be directing actors. I should really know what it is what their job is about. I should really understand their job before I can even begin to guide them through it. So I took acting classes, and I was far less intimidated by them than I thought I would be. And I realized that people that can't act make a living all the time. Mopsy. People that can't act make a living all the time, so I didn't see why I couldn't be one of them.
Superb.
To try to be an actress, and I looked 15. I was probably 22 or 23 or something, and I genuinely looked 15. I had a super baby face, and I'm 5'4", like I'm not a big girl, so everybody really believed I was 15. And I started. It's a great advantage to be that old and look that young.
It must have been super scary to move out there. Do you think getting the early exposure to such a vibrant, chaotic scene as the punk rock scene, that perhaps prepared you a little more than most people?
It was terrifying. I did it with $3,000. At my 36th anniversary was just the other day, September 29th, 1984. I moved to LA, and I didn't know anybody out here. I had nowhere to land. I went to a rent by the week motel and cried myself to sleep every night, probably for a year. I got an apartment pretty quickly, like in 2 weeks, and I got a job probably within the first 2 months. But I missed my parents devastatingly, and it was a different time. There weren't cell phones. There was no internet. So, and long distance calls were expensive. It was the kind of thing where you talk to somebody and go, well, I don't want to keep you. It's going to cost a lot of money. Like you really sweat your phone bill back then, because you didn't know, because long distance calls really added up. And my mother, I can't believe she had let me go. I can't imagine what it's like to be, I'm an only child, and to let your kid go without a cell phone. You know what I mean? Like no way to, like, just hope that she doesn't get raped and killed in an alley. And I happen to have a penchant for what I call murder porn, which is like true crime TV, true crime Dateline kind of cold case files and things. And I'm sort of nose deep in stories about women that come to LA to make it, and how often they don't, how often they die. And I just can't believe I had the nerve to do it, and I can't believe I got away with it.
The more you look into it now as you get older, you're like, holy shit, what was I thinking?
Yeah, what was I thinking? What brass balls I had. My mother, I don't know what she was thinking. And the thing that made it possible, and I would cry. My mother would say, I'll come out there, I'll fly out there tomorrow, and I'll pack your stuff up and you can come home. And that's kind of all I needed to hear. I knew I could go home. And then sometimes people say, well, Amy said, you're gonna come back with your tail between your legs. And that makes you really, really determined. When people think you're gonna fail, it's really motivating to not fail.
Yeah, definitely. You still have that kind of support system from your mom saying, look, everything's going to be all right. I can be out there and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. I couldn't do it again. I'm really impressed with myself now.
So did you get a chance to absorb much of the West Coast music scene once you came out here? Because the whole California has a much different vibe, but still a very intense, almost punk rock scene as well, especially around that time. Was your love of music able to grow in slightly different directions once you got out here?
No, I didn't go to see a lot of local bands, a handful here and there. I think it was a band called L7. But I was working all the time, and I didn't have any money. I didn't drink. There was like no real reason. I had no friends, so I'm not going to go out by myself. I would occasionally like go see them. After the second year or so, a bunch of my Boston friends, the punk rock Boston kids, all followed me out here. And there's a period of about a decade where I had like 10 or 15 people from Boston that lived out here with me, not literally with me, but they followed me out. But I had a huge support group, of like people that I consider family living here with me. And I didn't do a lot of small club stuff. I would see, but by small club, I mean like a bar, like a little bar. There's mid-sized stuff that like have, I don't know, under 1,000 people in them. And I would go see bands that I'm a huge fan of. I went and saw Ian Astbury's band.
Oh, the Cult.
The Cult. I was a massive, massive Cult fan. I ran into him in my neighborhood one time too, and I was so starstruck. I was walking my dog, and he was walking his dog, and with his wife, I guess. And we stopped to talk, and I was just like, and my girlfriend was just talking to them normally, and I'm just like completely fangirling, like, hyperventilating. I'm like, oh my god. Because when I was living in my shitty little apartment in Hollywood, in East Hollywood too, it's like in grungy 84 in East Hollywood, I had this fantasy that I would meet Ian Astbury and that we would become a couple. And then the way I imagined it though, was that I would still be working at my shitty job on Rodeo Drive and come home from work, and he'd be like watching TV, and then we'd make dinner. He'd move into my shitty apartment and I'd keep my shitty job, and he would just like fit himself into my life. My life didn't get more glamorous or anything. It was the weirdest thing. I just plugged Ian Astbury into my existing life, and that's how it would be. I think it's hilarious. You think most girls think if they're going to hook up with a rock star, they're going to start living like a rock star life. I'm not going to keep my retail job for $6 an hour. which is funny. Anyway, I would see bands like that at sort of mid-sized venues. And I'm a huge Elvis Costello fan and Nick Cave, but I've probably seen Elvis Costello and Nick Cave between 10 and 20 times each. I've seen the Cult 4 or 5 times. But yeah, my passion for going out to see music waned a great deal once I moved out here, just because it was a whole different vibe.
Had your focus kind of shift as well, because you were kind of trying to get onto a career path with initially directing, then moving into acting?
Right.
Was it exciting to land one of the lead roles in Child's Play 2 as like your first movie job? Or was it just kind of, this is how it works, if you like?
A little bit of both, actually. So I had done a little part in another movie with Sam Shepard and what's her name? From Beaches. So bad with I have COVID brain, I've been home in my house alone for so long, my brain just turned to mush. Barbara Hershey and Sam Shepard, called Defenseless. Anyway, when I started working, all work was exciting, all work was terrifying, and I had just gone through I had taken actually a union play downtown in LA in that era, and somehow that sort of jump-started me a little bit. I think working every day, doing this play every single day and being neck deep in actors, I had a more positive or less fearful attitude in auditions. And I got an episode of 21 Jump Street. I got an episode of Baywatch. To have back-to-back jobs like that was unheard of for me. And while I was doing Baywatch, I auditioned for Child's Play 2 and got it while I was still doing Baywatch. Super, super exciting. Biggest job of my career at the time. Of course, immediately went out and rented the first one, which I think is fantastic. And I was on that set. The story I tell about that set is they hired me at a flat rate so that I wasn't getting any overtime or anything. They could work me, 18 hours a day and I wouldn't get overtime. But Alex Vincent, who was 6 or 7, I think at the time, and Chucky takes like 9 puppeteers. And so Alex Vincent his schedule was dictated by child labor laws, and the puppet had 9 actors working him. So Chucky was more expensive to have on set than I was. So what would happen is we'd shoot these scenes, if you know anything about movie making, you shoot the establishing of the wide shot to establish the geography of a scene. So when you move in for close-ups and stuff, you have the audience knows where they are, And then they would shoot all of Alex's close-ups so he'd have like a 6-hour day and have to go to school and then go home. So they'd work him and send him home. Then they'd work Chucky and then send Chucky home. And I would then do most of my close-up stuff with nobody there on set with me.
How was that for you?
I mean, it was challenging, because there's nothing to react to you. There's like a piece of red tape on the wall over there and blue tape on the wall over there. And the voices for both of them are coming from behind my back or not from the places where the tape are. It's the script supervisor sitting next to the camera, because it didn't used to have what they now call video villages. But anyone that really wanted to see the action had to sit like right by where the camera was. The director would stand at the camera and look, with his own eyes at what the camera was seeing, rather than having a video feed 50 feet away in a tent. And so it was much more personal. And the script supervisor reading, and it's very difficult to direct your attention not at where the voice is coming from. You know what I mean? Like if I was talking to you right now, but the voice is coming from behind me, I would feel inclined to look behind me. It's like you want to look where the voice is coming. So I'm not a trained actress. I'm just an intuitive actress. So it was challenging, but I didn't give a shit. I was so friggin' excited to be there. I was happy to be there every single second. When I was done and they would wrap me, I would stay and hang out for hours longer. It was really, really exciting. And it's a job that keeps on giving for me too, in that Don Mancini and I stayed friends. We're still friends to this day. The hairdresser on that show, his name is Scott Williams. He's a close friend. We've always been friends through the entire time. And though Alex Vincent and I didn't really talk because he was 7, and he was 7. It'd be inappropriate for a 28-year-old chick to be hanging out with a 7-year-old. So anyway, like 10 years ago at a horror convention, we got back in touch, and now he's like my real brother. Like it was like no time passed. He's almost a 40-year-old man now, but we're super, super close. And then I got to go back and do Cult, and with fingers crossed, if this TV series happens, hopefully they'll asked me to be involved.
Because she was very vocal about your disagreement about the recent remake, but for me the TV series is a much more exciting prospect. The remake didn't seem, just another remake really at the end of the day.
Who remakes a movie that's a franchise that's still healthy and active? It's not like it had been dormant or people dropped, hadn't been one in 30 years. It's an active, ongoing, healthy franchise.
It was properly getting its pace back as well, which just seemed strange, just like pull the rug under. It's like, what?
It was super offensive to me, and the primary reason was because it could have stopped the production of the television show. It was difficult to know whether to root for the remake to fail or to succeed, because I didn't know which of those things would have a negative or positive effect on the decision to keep the series going. And I wasn't that vocal. I just said it on one little podcast, but it got picked up, and everybody kept putting more and more dramatic titles on it. Christine Elise rages against Chucky, loses her fucking mind over Chucky. There was just one conversation I had that everybody picked up. It was hilarious. But Don Mancini took me to a really nice dinner for it. He was very pleased. He thought it was hilarious.
Well, I think most people who are like fans of the franchise anyway would agree with that standpoint anyway. It's not like it had been so long and they're remaking it again because nothing had happened. It just seemed strange when it was still very active.
Yeah, but there's a weird thing with fans. Having just gone through the reboot with 90210 last summer, and having lived through that reboot thing, the remake with the Chucky thing, people that define themselves as fans of a project, whether it's Chucky or 90210, they're often wildly negative. They're often like, they hate every Chucky except the first one, but they're huge Chucky fans, or they like the first one and curse, but none of the other ones, or they have nothing but complaints about the way the doll looks over the course of time. Or it's really weird to me how, because the fans of 90210 were really negative about the comeback, which I loved. I thought it was really smart and funny. And I think if people gave it a chance and weren't so eager to be offended, they might have actually liked it. So I hear almost nothing but complaints online when I read stuff. And to be fair, in person, people are very different.
That's what makes the headlines, though. People don't want to seem to hear too much about positivity online. They'd rather flip it on the negative angle. That tends to be the case.
Yeah. I mean, if you went to a restaurant and had a tremendous experience, that you wouldn't necessarily hurry on to go online and give them a good review. But if you had a horrible experience, you can't wait to get home and write a bad review. And that's true about projects too. But there's a weird little caveat though. There's I'm not going to name it because I don't want to get it any traction, but there's a fan-made film, which I think in this case is an incredible breach of intellectual property, that when the people that made it put it up on YouTube, it got let's say in the first couple of days, it got 10,000 hits, and the reviews of it were 100% wildly, glowingly positive. Like, Don Mancini should take a lesson from you. And I'm like, what is going on? How can you say you're a huge Chucky fan and have anything bad to say about Don Mancini? It's just a weird disconnect for me.
The role of Emily Valentine in Beverly Hills 90210 came along in 1991. Your character was such a contrast to the rest of the cast. How much was you allowed to mold that character? Because particularly the look felt very real, and it could have easily not felt that way if, let's say, a TV studio tries to create an edgy character, if that makes sense. It could have gone a totally different direction. So I feel that it was a lot of you in that character.
Yes, it was. Having watched like that show Quincy with Jack Klugman, they did a punk rock episode, and Chips did a punk rock episode. And to watch mainstream network television try to do punk rock people was always really, really, really funny. So they just live on tofu and they only wear leather and they're dumb. Typically, they're also very dumb and with a tendency toward violence, which has got nothing to do with punk rock. But anyway, yeah. So the look was entirely mine. In the first episode, there's two outfits that I wore in the auditions. When I sing "Breaking Up Is Hard to Do" with that pink sort of baby doll top and the black engineer boots and the black leather hat. The black leather hat that I also wore in Chucky, so for sure it's my hat because it crosses many projects. I wore it in Cult as well. That was one of the audition outfits, and then you can't see what I'm wearing in the car in my makeout scene with Brandon, but I'm wearing a vintage 50s beaded sweater and ripped up blue jeans, and that was the other outfit I wore. So the character was conceived as being a Julia Roberts type, like a beautiful bohemian, gorgeous thing with long flowing hair and plays guitar, and I am not those things. So I went in as myself because that's all I can do, right? And they were like, oh.
Was it a particular person who picked up on, wow, this girl's genuine?
Well, I had to go back a couple times, so I guess nobody at any step of the process said, ixnayed me from the mix, so I'm thinking, but ultimately it's Aaron Spelling's choice. And I auditioned in Aaron Spelling's office for Aaron Spelling. So I owe that job to Aaron.
Do I recall there was no guarantee as to how long your character would be a part of the storylines, but it was a hit, so it became a recurring role. That must have felt good and a great confidence boost.
It's happened to me twice, on ER and on 90210. The first episode was one with a possibility that it could be as many as 10. Thank God I got, in both cases it worked and they kept me. But really what that is a chemistry test. So if they hire you and then it's written in stone, they've shot it, like that's Emily Valentine, and they don't like me, they will just get rid of me and make another character similar to that and cast a different actress. So it really comes down to chemistry and whether you're an asshole and if it works, and I'm grateful that both times I had the guillotine over my neck, that both times I did not pull the rope.
So was the popularity of the show and your characters something you enjoyed? Did you like the attention it gained? Because it was pretty dang huge.
That's a mixed thing. I'm not an attention seeker. I'm not that sort of person, which is why I never wanted to be in a band. I didn't want to be an actor. Like that's not something that I seek, but it's great to get, the only way you get better jobs as an actor is if people see you and like you. So the more notorious or more high profile your jobs are, the more opportunity you get. So, and people, like when I was living with Jason, I lived with Jason for 5 years, Jason Priestley, and Jason used to call himself the world's guest because anywhere he went, there was immediate familiarity for him and people treated him like they knew him really well. So there's an advantage in any room you go into, or you move, any town you're into, or any restaurant you walk into, people treat you really well. The flip side is a lack of privacy. Like I couldn't go to the mall for a long time. I couldn't do things where Jason or I were stationary and people could collect around us, like bowling. You know, you couldn't go bowling because you're in a stationary place. And Jason and I vacationed in Ireland over Christmas one time, and we were staying in these huge castles, like beautiful castles all over Ireland. And thank God, because we couldn't leave the properties. We'd go into the villages and stuff around these little castles, big castles. And it was like there had been a contest announced, like who can spot Jason Priestley? Like he could barely get his foot out of a car, and it was like, oh my God, it's Brandon! Like it was like we were being punked. It was the craziest thing. And the one time we tried to ignore it and like buy each other like an Irish sweater in a store, like a line was forming of screaming girls. And we ended up being captive at these hotels, these castle hotels that had, of course, they're beautiful hotels and they had skeet shooting and horseback riding and didn't suck. It did not suck. Don't get me wrong. But we couldn't go out in public. And that, we couldn't go to little pubs and stuff. We couldn't get any kind of an authentic experience of Ireland at all.
Imagine that now, if it was that intense then. Insane to think.
Well, there's two sides to that. Like, I'm really grateful that the internet and social media didn't exist when I was playing Emily and everybody hated her, because people are savage. And it's difficult, even when you know it's going to be mean, it's difficult not to read it. And you could read 1,000 really fawningly positive remarks about you, and then one person calls you an ugly douche, and that's all you hear. So that's no good. And I'm glad that didn't happen to me. But the other thing that happens now that I wish was true then and wasn't, is this whole world of conventions and ways to sort of, this is going to sound self-serving, but it's the truth, ways to monetize your career that didn't used to exist. You can be like, you have a big following on Instagram and somebody gives you $1 million to wear their necklace, and post it once. Like, I don't know if you saw that Fire Festival, that horrible music festival documentary. And like one of the Kardashians got $1 million for just saying how cool she thought that festival was going to be.
Unreal.
That I wish those opportunities to make money existed for me back then.
It's insane.
I would be a lot more comfortable in my life right now. So, it's a trade-off.
Yeah. How was it revisiting that whole 90210 world when the reboot and reimagining became a reality last year? Was that something you sank straight back into?
Well, first of all, Jason and I are still friends. I see Jason all the time. So he's like my brother. His wife is one of my best friends. So that I see him all the time. That wasn't any kind of a transition. In fact, it was awkward to act in front of him, because now it's like, I don't know him as an actor anymore. I know him as Jason, this guy, and so it's like acting, it feels really weird. In fact, that was true for all of them. It was a little bit awkward acting in front of them because it didn't feel like acting anymore. It felt like making pretend in the dining room with my friends. But aside from that, it was fantastic. I really liked the writers and producers. I think the stuff they gave me to do was hilarious. I was really grateful for my storylines. I thought were awesome. They dressed me in the best clothing I've ever worn in my life. Literally every outfit I wore, every individual outfit I wore in each episode, each one outfit cost them more than they were paying me per episode. The outfits were outrageous. They were like $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 outfits from head to toe. When you go from the dress to the shoes to the jacket and the jewelry, no expense was spared as far as making it look lavish. Mm-hmm. It was fun as a person that can't afford that kind of clothing in real life. It's never worn that kind of clothing in real life. It's fun to play dress up. And the cast was great. Like, everybody's pushing 50, I'm 55. Most of them are at or, younger than me for the most part, but not by much. And everyone's a grown up with kids and all the things in life that happen that are humbling, whether it's aging, not working as much as you'd like to, or whatever, all the things in life that may bring you back down to earth, And it was a really supportive, awesome environment. It was I used to say that China Beach was my favorite professional experience, but I think that 90210 thing I was really eager for it to go and have more seasons, because it was really, really fun. And from a vanity point Not only did I have this ridiculous clothing on, and you get what you pay for. So you buy a cheap pair of pants and they cut you in the wrong place and make you look short and fat, and you get a really expensive pair of pants and they make you look tall and thin. It's just like and the makeup artists and the hair people I've never had people take my old lady face and do as much with it as those people did. They were working magic. And I look in the mirror and be like, oh my God, I won the lottery. I come to work every day and they make me look pretty and they put me in clothing that feels fabulous and write funny words for me to say. And then I get to go on a set with a bunch of people I've known for 30 years and say, it's a lot. It was a lottery win. It was really the greatest thing ever.
How was it all coming back together, but obviously without Luke Perry to be there with you all? Was he someone you'd stayed in touch with over the years?
No, I hadn't.
No.
Others had. Jason certainly. Jason and Luke were close. The last time I'd seen Luke was 2 years before at a convention, which is another thing I wish they had back in the day. But Luke was the nicest person to me on the set the first time around. Luke really went out of his way to make sure I knew where I was going, where my trailer was, have somebody to have lunch with. He was really the most generous person that way that I've ever worked with. And not having him sucked, but he died in March and I didn't start shooting until June. So I went to one memorial for him and there were several. And I think everybody had sort of cried their tears and made their peace with it. But it was, I think, his absence was larger than his presence would have been. You know what I mean? The
outpouring of love all over the world from just fans and the media as well. It was lovely to see at the time, really, as tragic as it was. Just that outpouring of just positivity about his career and him as a person, really.
Yeah.
For me to see over here, it was just like, holy shit, couldn't ask for anything more.
Universally loved as a person. I saw the cutest thing with Leonardo DiCaprio talking about Hollywood movie and getting on set and meeting Luke in a table read or something and being starstruck. He's like, oh my God, I grew up watching him. He's my generation's James Dean. Oh my God, that's Luke Perry. And Leonardo DiCaprio is all aflutter like I was with Ian Astbury, which I thought was very generous of DiCaprio to do. There's nobody in town that DiCaprio hasn't met. And for him to be that kind of Luke, I think says a lot about who Luke was. So you say the response to the show was mixed from fans, because I thought the idea itself was refreshing and just a great twist on the usual reboot or sequel option. It's not, as far as I'm aware, it's not something that's used that often. I think Wes Craven did it in one of his Nightmare on Elm Street films, but that whole meta thing, it's not something I've seen that often. So it's disappointing that fans didn't react to it in a more positive way. Well, you're telling me. First of all, everyone pretended like it was some impossible to understand concept. Like it was some, Rubik's Cube with the 10 sides. Like it's not difficult. And with reality TV being as popular and, ubiquitous as it is, I don't understand why they couldn't understand this crossover, this half breed of, written and reality. And so people were primed to hate it if they were staunch 90210 fans from the beginning. Now, also keep in mind that the show was on the air for 10 years. I don't know how many individual characters made their marks on that show, but every single character has their fans. Even some character that did one episode, there's somebody out there that thinks that's the best character the show ever had. So a lot of people were mad about who got to come back. Mostly me, because why her of all the characters that were on that show? She was never even a regular. Why is she back? Why not Kathleen Robertson? Why not Tiffany Amber Thiessen? Why not? And in the answer to that could be many things, even that those girls maybe didn't want to do it or they were doing something else and couldn't do it. I don't know what the reasons for who they chose and how it worked that way. So there was all that, like all people getting their panties in a bunch because their favorite character wasn't back. And then there's the other battles of the people who are the Kelly Brandon team or the Brenda Dillon or Kelly Dillon. There's all these teams, and people wanted to see like Steve Sanders and who he married and where their kids were. I'm like, so you want to see Steve Sanders at 50 and visiting his kids in college? Like, do you want to see Brandon Walsh at 50 years old, even if he now owns the Peach Pit? Isn't that a sad life? That's just the obvious route. And it's so boring. So you're going to have, the reason the show ended after 10 years was there was no more fucking stories to tell. Everything that could possibly happen to those people had happened to them, whether it was a drug problem or getting, date raped or burned in a fire or killed by the mob. And everyone had multiple problems. Like I have a gambling problem. Now I have an alcohol problem. Now I'm in a cult. Now I've been brainwashed and I'm in a cult. There's nothing else that can happen to those people that hasn't already happened. You're going to recycle those stories again and have Kelly go back to a cult? Do you want to see Brandon Walsh serving David and Donna mega burgers at the Peach Pit? You think you want that. If you got that, you would have been so bummed. It would have been like, this is really, truly a trashing of the old show. But we got accused doing what we were doing. What we were doing was trashing the show, which I disagree full-throatedly. I think it was brilliant. I think the actors in the show, everyone got to sort of dictate a little bit what their storylines, what their characters were going to be going through. I thought people were super brave. A lot of the storylines overlapped with their real life in ways that maybe not super flattering or ego boosting, which is a brave thing to do. And, one of the complaints I read was we don't want to see we want 90210 back. We don't want these middle-aged plastic surgery people. Like, well, that's who we are. I mean, 50 years old. What do you want from us? Like, I'm not the plastic surgery part, but like, bloated middle-aged people. It's like, well, I'm not, I want to be 32 more than you want me to be 32, believe me, but I'm 55 and there's nothing I can do about that. So complaining about the ages and what do you expect from these people? So I am proud of it. And the show had an enormous built-in audience. The first episode it was the biggest night of the show of the summer, that first night. But it dropped off precipitously each week because people weren't getting any now. And I also say people that wanted, like, I want to see Brandon and Kelly because I love Brelly. I'm a Brelly fan. And well, you kind of got Brandon and Kelly. In the first episode, Jason and Jenny hook up and have sex in Vegas. Like, just pretend it's Brandon and Kelly. You're getting the same actors doing the things you want them to do. They're just calling them a different name. I just really didn't understand the complaints. I thought it was genius. I really loved it. I think that Brian and Ian got to do a lot of stuff, like a lot of comedy that I thought landed really well. I just thought it was fantastic. I liked the fragility of people exploring sexuality. I liked the idea of people struggling with being middle-aged and what it's like to not be 20 and on the cover of Rolling Stone and now have to I think that that's a much more relatable new chunk of stories to tell.
Such a more broader opportunities to take it that way, really is. But to bring things to a close and to bring things back a little to music, are you still a big music fan today? Any newer bands you listen to, and do you still enjoy music as much as you did?
I do. I'm always, and my taste goes all over the map. I mean, like jazz, like Nina Simone and Art Pepper and Chet Baker and Jimmy Scott and that sort of jazz stuff. I don't listen to hardcore. I didn't listen to hardcore when I was hanging out in the hardcore scene. Hardcore punk rock is really for live, Yeah. I think venues, not so much. I don't want to hear a 1.5 minute song at volume 10 in my dining room, So I'm a huge Nick Cave fan still. I think his music is really evolving very well. Even Grinder Man and his side project stuff I love. I've also sort of gotten exposed to, and I'm liking what is called the alt country world. Right. One of my favorites recently just died. Justin Townes Earl just died. Jason Isbell and Coulter Wall. He's a Canadian guy. It's not country in the traditional sense. I'm not a fan of that at all. It's more, I don't know how to explain it. It's more pared down in like honky tonk, right? A guy named Pokey Lafarge. Really love Pokey Lafarge. This is a retro sort of big band kind of thing. There's a man in, her name is Mojo Juju, but I think that there's something like the American sports teams getting rid of calling teams like the Redskins and stuff. Something about Mojo Juju was, I think, culturally insensitive. Right. So I think she's Moju now. Actually, I'm not sure what pronoun she prefers. But Moju. I'm a huge fan. I'm trying to be respectful of the pronoun, but I don't know which one I'm supposed to be using, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm a huge Billie Eilish fan. I think Billie Eilish is tremendous.
So, is there anything you miss about those early days of being so deep and entrenched in that whole punk rock movement? Anything you wish you could bottle from that time?
I wish I could bottle that I could see a band in a room with 200 people rather than having to go see Elvis Costello in a big, theater. Yeah. Nick Cave in an auditorium. I go in the Bunny Man, and I'm not a fan of big venues, so I wish I could bottle that. But aside from that, no, because those people are still my friends, and I still have those records, and my mother has great photos, and I feel like it's been captured really well. And if I wasn't still friends with those people, I might be more nostalgic, but I am. Yeah. And so that's the takeaway for me was the people. So
do you and your mom have enough photographs to maybe do a book at some point? Some of your photos are amazing. or like the self-portraits you used to do in all your punk rock gear, and you say your mum took a lot of photos as well. Could you ever do a book?
She could do very well with a gallery show of just early punk rock live music photos. My stuff, I've done a couple little shows here and there. Mine is really a hobby and sort of an outlet, not so much a thing I'm pursuing professionally or in any real way. I just had to be creative, and I wrote a novel too. I don't know if you know, I wrote a novel. A dirty comedy.
Because you've got a little film to accompany it as well, haven't you, right?
I did. I actually made the film first. It's a 10-minute short film comedy called Bathing and the Single Girl. Anybody can see it for free at to go to bathingbook.com, BATHING, bathingbook.com. If you go to the film tab, the film is there, and it works really well as a trailer for the book. The book is dirty comedy. It's kind of like Larry David was a girl and had a horrible dating life. Nothing sexy about it. Really raunchy and embarrassing. I'm super proud of it because unlike acting, it's the most solo thing you can do as a creator. I wrote it myself in like 8 weeks and then did an edit. It took another maybe 8 weeks. And I didn't have an editor though. So it's entirely, if you love the book, I get all the credit. If you fucking hate the book, I get all the blame. It's the most true exercise of my voice that I've been able to manifest so far. I have a cooking channel too. I have a vegan cooking channel on YouTube. So I'm just like got my fingers in everything, trying to stay busy and be creative. The photography, the cooking channel is all me. It's a one-man show too. Unless otherwise stated, I created the recipe. I cook it in front of you on camera. I edit it. I take all the food photographs. I take them myself. So it's truly a one-man show. And most of my photography at this point is food photography.
Well, I'll be sure to put all the links to all the various projects which you're doing in the podcast notes. And I want to say thank you ever so much for taking the time to talk to us. Really enjoyed chatting and all the cool stories.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you so much to Christine for taking the time to chat to me on the Straight to Video podcast. That really was a lot of fun and great to hear all her cool stories. For all the projects she mentioned, you can find links at itschristine.com, and I'll also put everything in the podcast show notes too. To you guys, thanks so much for helping me make it to episode 30. That really is a big achievement for this podcast, and I'm going to work hard to keep things growing with your great support. Please drop a share or fire a message and let us know what you're enjoying, and I look forward to speaking to all of you real soon.